What's up everybody, it's Matt with That Jeep Adventure, and this video is going to be talking about putting new brackets onto your TJ Dana 30. The last time I was riding on the trail, everything just kind of felt loose. Like as the suspension would cycle, it was making noise and there was popping, and just it was kind of like louder than usual. So when I got home, I crawled up under there and instantly saw multiple things that needed to be solved. The lower control arm mount on the axle side, half of it was completely ripped off the axle. So that's going to be one of the brackets that we're starting to replace. And even if it wasn't broken off, they need replacing anyway, just because the factory brackets are real thin and they're kind of like winged out just from sitting on them. So they're not in great shape. So we're going to replace those. And then also a while back I was having some like, I wouldn't really call it death wobble, but definitely a little bit of shimmy in the steering wheel. So we diagnosed that. I put a new wheel bearing on that on the passenger side, and that seemed to solve it for the most part, but I still felt a little play, and then ultimately, now that I've done more research, I think fixing that wheel bearing was just kind of like masking the problem. So a common thing on the TJ here is that the track bar mount gets kind of like rounded out on the axle side. So I pulled that off, pulled the bolt off, and sure enough, the hole is no longer round. It's like a big oval. I bet you could almost fit 2 bolts in there. So I know that that's moving around too. Again, common problem on the TJ. So we're going to be cutting that bracket off, and we're going to be fixing it as well. So that bracket, the track bar bracket, is coming from Artec, and I got the lower control arm brackets from White Rhino Fab here in Mississippi. So excited to try out some local products. I got them in the mail yesterday, and they're super beefy, way stronger than what came from the factory on this Dana 30. So first thing we got to do is get the axle out from under the Jeep and get it put on the shop table. It could probably be done by leaving the axle in the Jeep, but I'm just going to pull it out so we can get to everything, and I want to make sure that the tabs get put on just right. So here we go, let's get started. So we're going to start with the lower control arm brackets. You see our scientific measurement of a Sharpie mark here, a Sharpie mark there, where the old bracket used to like line up. And then here is where we're going to take the new bracket, and we're going to kind of line the front up with that line. So overall, it'll be kind of right. We also pulled another scientific measurement right here from the bottom of, I guess that's the shock mount, or the spring mount, to the cam bolt, and you can see we had to use a Sharpie because there's no numbers right there. Alright, so we got the brackets cut off of the axle, and Rob brought his welder over because that's what we're going to be using to put the new brackets on. So the 220 plug that I had in my shop was a different shape than the plug on his welder. So we're having to get creative and sketchy to make this happen, but I wouldn't expect it to be any other way with us.
Dang. Might need to.
Rob started by tacking the brackets into place so we could double check our measurements. Burning them in, he alternated sides to allow the axle tube to cool. You don't want your axle to warp. The Artec bracket came in 3 pieces, so we tacked it together before fitting it to the axle. Once it was together, it fit in there just right. Now that the new brackets are all on the axle, I'm gonna get it cleaned up and get some paint on it before it goes back into the Jeep. Well, it's been a couple days since we got the axle back under the Jeep. I had to order a few things and we got them all in the mail today. So I needed a new cap for the tie rod end. It's a new tie rod, but somehow along the way the bushing was busted, so I'm gonna replace that while it's off. And then also I ordered a Rusty's adjustable track bar. After doing a little bit of research, you pretty much either go with the Curry setup, which is pretty expensive, or you opt for the factory style ends on each side. So from what I was hearing, the Heim joint just doesn't really last all that long, and you just end up buying a bunch of track bars or just a bunch of Heim ends. So instead of dealing with that, I just went back with the factory style setup, but adjustable. I've never had any issues with it, like, you know, stop and flex or anything like that on the trail. So I figure just why change it if it's not broken. So originally my track bar was the factory track bar, so even when we put the 4-inch lift on it, I was able to keep the stock track bar up until now, because the little trick is just to re-drill the hole. I mean, it's definitely not the best way to do it, but if you don't want to spend money on an adjustable track bar, this is a way to get the extra length out of it. So instead of drilling another hole in my new Artec track bar bracket on the axle, I figured now was the right time to upgrade to an adjustable track bar. So kind of get this put in, and basically this is going to control how the axle is centered under the vehicle. So I'm going to measure the factory track bar and then add the distance between these two holes, because before it was pretty close. So I'm going to take that length and add it to this length, and this is going to be like a 1/2 inch or an inch or something like that. So I'm going to measure this, and that's what I'm going to set the new track bar to, and hope that gets us close, at least close enough to where I can probably go get this thing aligned once it's all done. For the track bar to fit at full droop, it needs to be pulled to the driver's side. This can be accomplished with a quality ratchet strap. Alrighty, well, the axle is back in and everything's hooked up, so now we're ready to roll the Jeep out of the shop. All we got to do is bleed the brakes, and then we're going to drive it around and try to get the suspension to settle at ride height, and then do the measurements on the axle and kind of try to get it close to being centered, and then I'm going to go basically get an alignment and they'll fine tune it off. So let's bleed the brakes so we can start driving it.